Hey everybody, and welcome back to another F1 Roundup brought to you by the brilliant Seedream app. This week I want to talk, of course, about the Singapore Grand Prix, but 2 points in particular. One is Daniel Ricciardo in what could be the very last time we ever see him driving a Formula One car in anger on a Grand Prix weekend. And the other is the way in which Daniel Ricciardo kind of went out, if that's indeed what he's done, by taking that controversial fastest lap point at the end of the Grand Prix away from Lando Norris and McLaren. Let's start by saying a big congratulations to Lando and McLaren, because that was one of the most dominant performances over a Grand Prix weekend that we have seen since Max Verstappen used to do that on a regular basis. And yet it was Max who was dominated by Lando and McLaren this weekend. They were just on fire. You know, Lando was full of confidence. That car was working in these high downforce conditions. The car seems to work so well. McLaren's car at the moment works well everywhere, but on the high downforce circuits, in its high downforce configuration with the big wings on, it just seems so much more efficient than any other car out there. I mean, in the opening laps of that Grand Prix, he was pulling away from Max Verstappen at quite some rate. I think it was like more than half a second a lap. And everybody was confused about just how hard he was pushing. And then once everything had got up to temperature and things had settled down, the team asked him then to push and build a gap. And all of a sudden, he was just able to start delivering over a second a lap over Max Verstappen. And there was nothing that the Red Bull could do about it. That was the level of dominance that we had this weekend. So huge congratulations. They kind of got everything right. I mean, Lando just about got away with it, didn't he? A couple of close calls, hitting the wall and skimming the wall with his front wing. You'll have all seen those clips, I've no doubt. But he very nearly came a cropper, and that could have been nasty. A slight lapse in concentration, like we saw from George Russell last year, didn't we, in Singapore? Clipping the wall, and for him, it ended his race. This time, Lando got away with it. But other than that, a really good, really professional, and just generally fantastic performance from McLaren. With Lando being in clear air, he was able to do whatever he wanted with that car. I mean, you saw from Oscar, who's in the same car, and we know he's a great driver too, just not able to do the same things in a car that's in turbulent air from the cars in front. It makes such a difference. So the fact that Lando was able to stay in front of the start line for a change really did sort of make his race a lot easier for him. He still had a lot of work to do in very tough conditions, and he did it exceptionally well. Massive shout to Max Verstappen, because this was a weekend that really was about damage limitation for Max on a circuit they should not really have worked very well on. Max pulled something incredible out the bag in qualifying to get himself on the front row, and it was that really that enabled him to, although he had no match for Lando, because Lando disappeared into the distance, Max was also kind of able to look after tyres and run in relatively clear air for most of the Grand Prix. So actually, that qualifying lap from Max really did save a weekend, and it was a really good weekend, about as good as they could have possibly hoped for, certainly on Max's side. On Checo's side, again, very disappointing. If you haven't downloaded the Seedream app, let me tell you, this is an app that some friends and I created a couple of years ago that we've been developing, and I now believe genuinely that it's the best Formula One app out there for fans of the sport like you. I would love you to go and try it. It's totally free, and then let me know what you think. It's the first app I open every single day as a Formula One fan, genuinely, not because I helped create it, but because it's the best place to get all of my F1 news and content. I hope it can be the same for you too. But I want to talk about Daniel Ricciardo, because as I record this video, we've had no official announcement yet, but it seems widely known and accepted, even by him, that could well be his last race in Formula One. Certainly for the team at RB, probably forever. Although we have seen a few comebacks in the past. Let's not ever write that off as an idea. But I want to say what an amazing guy Daniel Ricciardo is. As you know, I've worked in the media in this sport for quite a number of years now, since leaving McLaren as a team member. And every interaction that I've had with Daniel, every time I've spoken to him, every time he has come onto our show when I worked at Sky, every time I've interviewed him or spoken to him as part of my BBC duties, he has been just an absolute gentleman. And even more so than that, brings so much positive energy into a room. So when you're interviewing or doing some media commitment, he just walks in with that great big smile. It lights up the room. And I think anyone who's able to light up a room, they are the people you want in your life. And I think he just has so much positivity around him. I think the sport will miss him. On track, I think he's still been one of the most talented drivers, and in recent times, and the very reason he's no longer driving for RB, if indeed we get this announcement in the next couple of days, it's because his results haven't been good enough. And there's no denying that. This is a brutal sport. I actually said in commentary on Friday at the BBC, I said it's a really harsh and brutal decision from RB to drop a driver, effectively ending his career sort of 3/4 of the way through a season. He doesn't even get to do the big send-off, the big goodbye. There's no announcement beforehand so that he can really enjoy his final moments. He came out of Singapore still with a bit of an unknown. Everyone seems to know it's his last race, and I think he's accepted it himself. We still haven't had the official announcement made. And there'll be a number of contractual reasons why they haven't been able to do that, but it just seemed very, very harsh on Daniel, pretty brutal. And it is a brutal sport. The flip side of that, of what I said on Friday in commentary, was although it's harsh and brutal, seems incredibly unfair on so many levels, it's also an elite level sport and very big business. This is not, school sports day, where we just want to give everybody a chance to keep them happy and to look after their feelings. Unfortunately, Daniel's had quite a number of chances in this sport. He's been around for a long time, done some amazing things with it, but when the results are consistently not there, and RB are in a very tight championship fight with the teams around them, the likes of Williams have clearly taken a step forward. They can't afford to slip back in that fight because it costs them a lot of money, prestige, status in the pit lane, all the rest of the things that come with the Constructors' Championship. This is serious and big business. So performance is what matters, not about how friendly or smiley your driver is, harsh that seems. So it is difficult for Daniel. He handled it with a whole bunch of class, as I knew he always would. And I hope we get to see him back in the paddock. I hope he can come back in some kind of role, because the paddock is a better place with him in it. And as I said earlier, people like that who light up a room, who bring positivity wherever they are, those are valuable people to have around you. I hope he's not gone forever. So that was Daniel Ricciardo. We're expecting an announcement. I'm recording this video on Monday. The announcement we expect maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. On the flip side of that, whenever there is a sort of a dismal story or a sad story of sorrow and somebody losing a seat like this, it of course opens opportunity for someone else. And if that is to be Liam Lawson, well, then he thoroughly deserves his opportunity. He got a shot, didn't he, last year? Did a really strong job with it, and that's what's put him in this place. And Red Bull and RB also are in championship fights where they need to score points and bring performance to the table. So bringing a young driver in who's already proven that he can do it is no longer the risk that it might have been seen years ago. The likes of Ollie Behrman and Franco Colapinto, by the way, big shouts to him. What another spectacularly good weekend for him and that Williams in Singapore. This kid is good, and I'm so pleased he's got the chance at Williams, and I hope we can find a seat for him either next year at Sauber, which is the one remaining seat left, and if not then very quickly after that, I hope, because he's too good not to have in this sport. But these young drivers coming in and delivering, being prepared and being ready and being mature enough, being able to handle the cars and the media commitments and the pressure that goes with it. Because a number of drivers have done that now, it's opened up the door to teams thinking differently and more seriously about them as potential opportunities for even the bigger teams now. We've seen it Mercedes with Kimi Antonelli. Ollie Behrman has, of course, his full-time seat next year, and it looks like Liam Lawson will be on the grid too. It's great for the youngsters in this sport. It's great for the future of this sport. And if you can deliver, it'll all be a justified move, won't it? So that's the Daniel Ricciardo story, or at least one half of it. The other side of the Daniel Ricciardo story was the sort of controversial move of him coming in the closing laps to put on a set of fresh, soft tyres and go for the fastest lap to take that valuable point away from Lando and McLaren. It's only controversial because Daniel was racing, of course, for the sister team of Red Bull, who, of course, have Max Verstappen in this championship fight. Now, I've got my views on this, and my views are actually that it was fine. Some people think it's highly controversial. Some people think it's unethical. Some people think it's just plain wrong and should not be allowed to happen. And all of those views are fair. But the way I've looked at this is that if you want to be angry with somebody, be angry with the rule makers, because there is no actual rule preventing this from happening. And my take on this was Formula One, and having worked in a team, I know this firsthand. Formula One's about exploiting the regulations as they're written, looking for loopholes. We do it on a technical basis all of the time. The very best teams and designers, engineers are looking for opportunities, loopholes in the rules. In fact, McLaren did it, didn't they? McLaren have just done it with that flexible rear wing that we saw in Baku that gave them that advantage down the long straight. We know that the rules are there to try and outlaw flexible bodywork in terms of gaining aerodynamic advantage. So you could argue that it's against the spirit of the regulations. Designing a wing that then flexes up, that mini DRS as it's been termed, gave them a big advantage. And it is against the spirit or the intention of the regulations, absolutely. This is not what the FIA intended to happen when they wrote their regs. However, they didn't write them well enough because it left it open to a very clever team like McLaren exploiting that loophole. And they did it very well. Fair play to them. I don't think anyone can argue that the wing's illegal because it isn't. There is no FIA test that would prove that that wing is illegal and therefore it's legal. That's what McLaren would have looked at when they came up with that design. And I think it's pretty much the same thing in the sporting regulations. The teams are looking to exploit loopholes in the sporting regulations, and that's exactly what Red Bull and RB did yesterday. You can argue that the Formula One should never allow two teams to be owned by the same entity. And actually, lots of people do argue that. Zak Brown's been very vocal about that, particularly in recent times. And there's a good case to say that that should be listened to. But at the moment, the rules do allow that. There's nothing stopping Red Bull as an entity owning two competitors in this sport. They've done it for many, many years. And when you own two teams in the sport, and when there's no specific rule preventing what happened yesterday, it's an opportunity for someone who owns two teams in the sport, just like it could be an opportunity for someone who maybe supplies a power unit to a team further down the grid, like a Haas helping out Ferrari, for example. If the rules allow for that kind of exploitation, a team like Red Bull is going to do it. Now, I don't know if Christian Horner actually got on the phone to Lauren Mekies at Red Bull and said, listen, you need to bring your driver in. If Red Bull are calling the strategy at RB, you could argue that's kind of pushing the boundaries and that is really exploiting to the limit, maybe beyond, from an ethical standpoint of what we want sport to be. And many people, by the way, are arguing exactly that from this weekend. But for me, the regulations allow this to happen. And so why would you not do it? If you want to be angry, as I said, be angry at the rule makers. And it may well be this triggers another look at the rules, that we start to close up loopholes. In the same way we are going to do with the technical regulations, McLaren are going to modify that rear wing at the request after a conversation with the FIA. You can probably find, we'll probably find that it's written into the next set of regulations, something specifically banning it. Maybe a test gets developed to look for that kind of flexibility. And maybe the next set of regs will prevent the kind of thing that happened with Daniel happening yesterday at the Singapore Grand Prix. There is, of course, the case or the argument that this was giving Daniel a nice way to finish his career by putting on a fresh set of quali tyres and going out and having some fun, pushing an F1 car to the absolute limit on a street track like that under the lights for what could be the very last time. And all of that is true. That's a very nice thing for Daniel to be able to have done. He will have enjoyed it. But there is no doubting in anyone's mind, there was also an eye on helping out strategically the Red Bull team further up the front, taking a point away from Lando and helping Max Verstappen in Red Bull's main team in the big championship fight. It may well come back to raise up as a story again if Max Verstappen wins this championship by just one solitary point. But you could also point at many other incidents where McLaren have lost points and left points on the table, and lots of other scenarios up and down a season. No season is won or lost on one particular incident, and it will be exactly the same with this. I would, of course, love to know all of your thoughts on any of the topics that I've covered today. Anything to do with the Singapore Grand Prix, drop me a note in the comments below. I will always try my best to respond to you and interact with you and have a conversation if I can. If you're not yet following or subscribing to this channel, please go and do that now. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I will speak to you again very, very soon. Ta-da.